So in last week's video, we looked at 3 mastering engineers and we followed along their process, and something interesting cropped up, and that was that all 3 of those engineers all used something called soft clipping before they went into a limiting phase. But why do they all do soft clipping at that phase? In today's video, we are going to answer what is soft clipping, why would you use it? So I think where we should start is what's the difference between compression, limiting, and then soft clipping. I'm going to start off with an analogy. Please bear with me. Imagine you're bouncing on a bouncy castle. We've all seen a bouncy castle, I hope. And you're swinging your arms up and you're going as high as you can. That is your dynamic range. You press into the bouncy castle, spring up, fly up into the air. Now imagine someone's hanging over the edge of that bouncy castle, and every time you get a little bit too high, they quickly reach out and push you down. That is a compressor. It takes a little bit of time to affect. They wait until you're at a certain height in your dynamic range and then push you back down, overall reducing your dynamic range. Now for a limiter, you're bouncing on your bouncy castle and all of a sudden someone puts a concrete roof on the top of that castle, and if you hit it, you immediately stop because it's a concrete roof and it's very abrupt, it's very harsh, and you're not getting past that point no matter how hard you bounce. So for a soft clipper, now replace that ceiling with a nice soft padded, perhaps a reverse upside down bouncy castle. It's still going to stop you, you're not going to be able to surpass at any point, but it does it gently. You kind of press into it. It also distorts your trajectory as you're going up. So you move into it, it kind of takes your speed away a little bit in your dynamic, and then you end up coming back down and repeats. I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what all 3 do. So why would we use a soft clipper instead of a limiter, and how does it achieve that? So here's a sine wave playing out of Alchemy, hitting on every beat with varying velocity. So we kind of get some peaks and they cross over a little bit. You'll see in the oscillator. All right, so we change in level and we end up manipulating that sine wave and it ends up looking things like this. So let's take the soft clipper that we used in the previous video. We'll use it because it's got very simple settings. We can see the slope here, which, you know, has a lot like the difference between a knee in a compressor going all the way to a limiter, right? And by default would sit right in the middle like here. So now we can hear a difference, right? But it's so minor, it's even imperceptible to showing up on the oscilloscope. Now we can leave the gain and the output exactly as they are, and we can adjust the slope. And by bringing it more to the curved slope, we can just see that it's controlling the overall level. We've still got a change in sound, listen. It's considerable, right? Adding that distortion. We're now able to gain it up a lot more. It's controlling those peaks. Whereas the slope the other way slams it into that concrete ceiling we were talking about before. But it's way more transparent. It's not adding distortion to allow for that gain change. But if we do this, now it's distorting when it hits that flat ceiling in a horrible way. Do our nice gentle slope, however, it's cushioned before it hits there. It's much nicer. Let's look at a more advanced soft clipper that can show us some other ways of working. I say more advanced and I pull up something with 2 controls, but it has a little advanced tab here. So this allows for some different types of algorithms and things like anti-aliasing as well. So here we've got 3 different types of algorithms, and the more we drive, and we're driving quite a lot here, we get the different options. We can see we start to get those curves that we had in the other soft clipper. Now, depending on our source material, we want to use the different algorithms, and they do vary quite considerably. Now, we're pushing this by 83%. It's a long way up. Switch it to sine, and it's almost back to the original sine wave that it was at. Parabolic is heavy distortion, but we do get more level out of it. Now this tool here allows us to go way beyond the 100% point. So we can hear how getting to that real ceiling is impacted by the algorithm. This curves it off a lot more. touching it, so we just take the key peaks away. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. So in the 3 mastering videos we looked at, and generally for anyone that's going to teach you mastering, they're going to use compression, soft clipping and limiting throughout the chain. Compression's there to reduce the overall dynamic range, and you can do it with a time frame. So something like a very fast transient, a fast drum hit, a bit of percussion, a rim shot for example, can be exceptionally loud, but it can go right through a compressor and the compressor's too slow to ever grab it. It gets through and doesn't reduce that dynamic range. But say a big bass swell comes in that takes longer, the compressor can grab that and pull it down and reduce the overall headroom, allowing us to bring the quieter sounds up and have an overall average level while maintaining that transient information. Track here, and if we have a quick listen with the just standard EQ up in Logic. All the low end in the bass is the loudest thing in the mix. Everything else is below this line here, look, right? But we can hear that snare popping through in some other bits. If we look at the waveform, we can see some of those transients that we talked about, like this for example here, just snapping right the way through. If we just open Logic's stock compressor, pop it onto graph mode so we can really see what's going on. Take auto gain off, put threshold all the way up, take auto release off, set our release to about 175, which roughly correlates to this BPM. And we're going to put the knee all the way up. Otherwise you can see that the flatter we go, it kind of just curves. Because if we go all the way to 0, it basically just ends up being flat. We're just going to pop that knee in so we've got a nice bit of curvature. Okay, and if we bring the threshold down, only a couple of dB here, we can see quite a bit of compression is happening. But it's capturing just about everything. It's pulling it down by a couple of dB. The meter says pulling it down by around 1 dB. Let's pull it to -10. And now dB and a half to 2 dB, right? However, if we really slow off that attack, something kind of ridiculous for the example, like 150 here. You can now see it's not compressing nearly as much. In fact, now it's only pulling back 1 dB, so we've kind of got that half a dB back. And that's because things like this transient are getting right through the compressor and not being touched. So after they're escaping through and that part of the dynamic range isn't being reduced, these are still pushing into the limiter like so as we're pushing them up. And if we could just trim all of those off a little bit, we could push it up an extra few dB without any real loss. And this is where the soft clipper comes in. Now the main reason you would use a soft clipper is if you want to achieve the maximal loudness from a track you can. Like we're just looking to shave off a couple of dB so the limiter doesn't have to work before it lifts everything else up, giving us that couple of dB of extra loudness. This can really work. All right, so let's look at this in a practical use case. So this is the mix track for Digital Tears, which is out next month, shameless plug. But a perfect example, as we can see. Despite my best efforts, we even have things here that seem to almost reach 0. Minus 0.6 dB, in fact. So on here, we've got the Air Soft Clipper. I'm going to go back into the advanced mode. And in here, I'm looking to get a reduction of just a couple of dB. I know it has an incredible scale of all the way down to 100. We're looking just to have it like tickling up the top here, basically. That's all we really want to do with it. So we're going to take the drive down by default. And all I'm going to want to do here is just apply a little bit of that drive. So I'm finding the right point. We can see here we're gaining around a decibel or so. Now I'm purely using this because it's such a simple tool. I would recommend something like FabFilter Pro L, Brainworks True Peak, or the Ozone limiters, but this because it's just a good example right now. Okay, so for me, around -8, can't really put it any further back than that. If we pulled it all the way to 9.5, it's distorting. Sounds like it's falling on its arse, so about -8, good amount of gain. That's as loud as we can take that. So that would be the limit of how loud we could get that track to be. Now, Let's play that back and then introduce the soft clipper. And there, as you can hear, that is absolute night and day difference.